Another week, at least in this part of the world. When I was in Saudi Arabia, the week started with Saturday. Here it starts with Monday. So it really doesn't matter. It's wherever you are. It's Monday, I guess. First quote is from Will Rogers, who says, "Don't let yesterday take up too much of today. Don't let yesterday take up too much of today." And that was from Positive Quotes for Every Day, which is good. Moving on to Margaret Stortz, Reverend Dr. Margaret Stortz. Her subject today is peace. And her first quote from the Emerson Essays is on page 191, if you happen to have that publication, which I don't actually. I've got Emerson books, but I don't have the Emerson Essays there. He says, "All reform aims in some particular way to let the great soul have its way through us." So reform, in the best sense of the word, is the expression of the divine coming through us. And in the Science of Mind textbook on page 285, this is what Ernest Holmes says. "We cannot enter into peace while we are in a state of confusion. It cannot be so. You can't hold two opposing things in your mind at the same time. You can switch between them, but you can't hold one unless you start getting rid of the other." And then Reverend Margaret goes on to talk about some definitions of peace. And she says, one of the definitions of peace is the absence of war, which at a surface glance is accurate, but certainly not deeply definitive. Does it suggest simply that when armed conflict is not present, peace is present? Perhaps it is to a certain degree, but peace can be absent for any number of reasons. She says there are, for instance, great rages and dichotomies within ourselves that prevent peace from surfacing. We're kind of torn sometimes between different things that we want to do or think we should do or trying to do, and kind of get pulled in two different directions, in other words, which obviously creates lack of peace. She says there can be deep misunderstandings among groups of people that drive peace away. Definitely in politics, right? As part of the divine nature, peace is also part of our nature, which means that peace can surface all on its own account. We need only make the inner opening, and peace of mind will naturally come. She says, by the same token, when we're internally churned up for any reason, on our own or due to something external, peace cannot come forth. Combative ideas and peaceful mindscapes cannot both exist at the same time in the same place. Right, we all know this. They can't coexist, right? Since external circumstances cannot always produce natural settings, it's going to be up to us to clear any disturbing debris away, that is, so that we can settle into the calm, the order, the harmony, and the accord that allow the deep comforts of peace to appear. It's worth the effort because it is accompanied by joy and well-being, all natural and healthy. So what do you think about when you think about peace? Well, as Reverend Margaret said, one definition is the end of war. We were watching a program on TV yesterday. It's kind of a series. It's based on a whole series of books by a veterinarian who lived in northern England, I guess, and his career started, I think, when did his career start? It started sometime in the 1930s, I think. And he qualified as a veterinarian in Glasgow, Scotland. Then he came down to work for a veterinarian who ran a fairly big rural business practice in Yorkshire in northern England. And this story is about him and all the people around him, his boss's brother, and what he eventually marries, and his family. But it's a story that's got tenderness in it, it's got sad stuff in it, and it's got peace in it as well, because yesterday's episode was about the ending of World War II. You know, it started just in the last days of World War II, back in their practice in Northern Yorkshire. And as it moved on and kind of into the second day of the episode, peace in Europe was declared, and you could see people celebrating. And that indeed is one form of peace, and it's a wonderful form. But I think the one that's most important to us is the peace that we feel inside of us. And we can achieve that in lots of ways. Sometimes it's not easy, you know, but we can achieve it by doing our spiritual work, by doing some meditation, doing some prayer work. But most, I think, importantly, is when something comes up that is disturbing and we don't need to hang on to it, we let it go. And how do we do that? Well, we concentrate on what it is that we do want, or at least what we don't want. And as part of this whole process, there are things like resentments that disturb peace, anger, it disturbs peace. Anger is not always bad. It sometimes gets stuff out of our system. But the problem comes when we retain anger, right? When people have an anger management issue where the slightest thing sparks them off. And that's the opposite of peace. So to me, peace of mind is the most important piece. When I'm doing what I believe to be right, when I'm being kind to myself and other people, yeah, that brings me feelings of peace. But what about you? What brings you feelings of peace? So I did not like the affirmation today. You know, the divine good fulfills me, always has, always will, and I access it every day. Fine, that's one she gives us every day. But I really didn't like the one she gave us today for the simple reason that it's based on negative. And rightly or wrongly, I did some research on negative and how your subconscious mind accepts it, and apparently it to some extent it ignores the not. So if you say, I'm not going to be angry, I choose not to be angry, then the subconscious mind seems to concentrate on that anger in this case. So I like to turn things around and make them positive. So I kind of switch it around a bit. Is this true or not about the negative? Well, from my research, yeah, having negative affirmations tends to negate the affirmation. I'm not saying it brings anything bad upon you, but my research indicates that having negative affirmations negates the affirmation, the thing you're trying to achieve. So anyway, here's my bit. I release anything within or without me that is unlike peace. I release anything within or without me that is unlike peace. So you're releasing. It's positive because you're letting something go, you know. So there you are. Anyway, Reverend Lisa will be back tomorrow at 9:15 on Creative Way Spiritual Center's Facebook page. My class on Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. Who would not want to change their thinking and change their life? Anyway, the class begins tomorrow. It's at 6:30 p.m. in the evening. And I said there's a more advanced class by another of my fellow ministers, Reverend Dana Vogt, and that starts on Thursday, and that's about treatment and meditation. So if either of those interest you, please text me 832-271-0717, and I will promise you I will respond. And what I must check is I must check my junk mail, because I forgot. Sometimes things go straight into junk without coming through, and I've not been checking that recently, at least not on my messages. So my prayer for everyone is that you know peace in your heart, and I release this word with gratitude into a divine law that always says yes, and so it is. So until next time, namaste.